Welcome to our session. We're going to be talking today about single session work in school settings. And we do welcome also our online participants. Otherwise, we wouldn't be using microphones, but this certainly is important. And we'll try hard to be very multi-partial to both our in-person and online folks today. My name is Debbie Healy. I'm the chair of the psychology department at Our Lady of the Lake University. I'm a counseling psychologist. And in a previous life, I spent 38 years on the K-12 side with children at the secondary age, middle school and high school. I started my career as a high school English teacher and then became a reading specialist and found that really the obstacle to reading performance for kids wasn't phonics. It was almost always stories of life, what was happening in their world and their social world. And so I became a school counselor. And during my time today, I'll talk some about my experiences as a school counselor and how very relevant and imperative single session mindset is in working with children. And I invite my colleagues to introduce themselves.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Joe Cox. I guess I'm a fourth year doctoral candidate now at Our Lady of the Lake University. And I've been working as a therapist for about six years this month, actually, I think. And I joined the program about 2 years ago and have been investing a lot of time and energy and interest into single session therapy. So happy to be here to talk with you all about it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Grazia. Just like Joe, I'm a student at Lady of the Lake University, a doctoral candidate as well. Well, my experience with youth and adult has been a little bit more recent compared to my colleagues. I'm a licensed psychologist in Italy. I just moved back for the doctoral program here in the US. I work with the children at Center for Miracles back in San Antonio and also with adults. So I've had a lot of experience with students seeking mental health support because they do not receive that support usually in the school settings due to different reasons. And Dr. Healy will present us those challenges that many of the students go through. Well, what else? That's me, and I hope you will enjoy our presentation.
All right, great. We are offering continuing education credits for this session if anyone is interested in that. And as we go through the day, Andy's going to help us do a sign-in sheet with your name and email. So I'll create certificates for sessions that you attend if you're interested in continuing education units. So as I said, I worked with kids a long time, and I was the director of school counseling for over 100,000 children. I did that for about a decade. And so I was in charge of social emotional learning curriculum and also was the supervisor of 300 school counselors, having been a school counselor myself. And this was at the same time that I was a licensed psychologist. So I heard many stories of the road from the practitioners doing the real work in the schools. We had 124 campuses and we're the third largest school district in Texas. Texas, as many other states in the US, are challenged by lots of directives to schools, prohibitions against things in schools that are coming through federal legislation and or executive orders. And so how that impacts the work becomes very germane to what we're going to talk about today. All right, next slide, please. Thanks. We'd like to know what you are hoping to get out of our session today. So maybe a quick shoulder chat, and if we can get a couple folks to share out, what are you hoping for? So that helps us to kind of guide and edit and curate our comments today. So we'll give you a minute or so to just either shoulder chat or think about it yourselves, and hopeful that we'll have a couple of people tell us what you'd like to get out of today's session. Also true for our online folks that can use the chat.
presume them up on my device too. So like
Okay.
for
Okay,
online
cool.
contributions, I can sort of help communicate those to
Okay,
you.
perfect.
I'm just like getting that set up. So it might just take a few minutes.
No, that's great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. What are some comments from the group that help us to tailor what we're doing today? Anybody willing to share? What would you like to get out of today's session? Yes.
So I don't work for schools. I'm in primary care behavioral health. And so I'm getting a lot of kiddos coming from, or
Yeah.
getting like referred from the schools or like being, coming to the primary care setting and saying like, I'm struggling with ADHD symptoms or behavioral concerns. And so basically anything that I can do to better partner with my colleagues in the schools.
Yes.
Just any interventions or supports or anything to learn to better serve our kiddos.
Excellent. So for those who might not have heard, since we don't have a microphone all the way around the room, how do we connect when we work, let's say in primary care, private practice or other settings? How do we connect with folks in school settings? That's a great point. Other things you'd like to get out? Yes. Mhm.
We have swimming war and the new war.
Yes.
More terrible, and we are going to we're working with Jessica for a few years,
Yes.
and we're going to bring the SSIs to, thank you. And so we're going to bring the SSIs to the Israeli education system.
Wonderful.
And so I wanted to hear about your experience working in the educational settings. How do you work with the counseling team? All that you can give me will be great, and I'll take it back home.
Thank you so much. We'll talk a little bit about critical.
I don't know.
Thank you. We'll talk a bit about critical incident work that we have done in the schools for both individual trauma and shared more global or universal traumas. We'll talk a bit about that. Thank you. Anything else? One more. Yes.
Tiny school district, and I feel like for my school district, we're still pretty heavily reliant on like 8-week psychotherapy models. And at least just in my experience being a school psychologist, there's not enough resources or staff availability to treat every single kid with like internalizing concerns or any type of concerns. And I feel like within the field of school psychology, single session therapy models or single session interventions are not addressed or used at all within our field. And I feel like no one even knows about it. So I'm particularly interested in kind of leveraging that work into schools and kind of getting the conversation started with school psychologists.
That's a wonderful conversation. And I think, the single session mindset and single session framework is a delivery method, but it's not a theory of psychotherapy. And so there are theories of psychotherapy that you're going to hear about from some of our resident experts as well. What are some of the theories that will work well? You're not going to do psychoanalysis in a school setting, and so some of the strength-based work, solution-focused work, and narrative work really, I think, lend themselves very well, and strength-based approaches to therapy lend themselves well for the kind of brief work that we do in schools. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So as we move forward, we will address many of those. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about some of the obstacles that exist in schools. We have almost 54 million kiddos in public in education, K-12 in the United States. Almost 50 million of those kids are in public school settings. which again, as I mentioned before, are more and more challenged with different kinds of either prohibitions or requirements of compliance. And then according to the American School Counseling Association, the average number of students assigned to a school counselor is about 406, but my experience is it's a lot larger than that. And for school psychologists, it tends to be 1,000 or more. And often our school psychologists are itinerant. They travel between one or more schools, 2 schools, 3 schools, and potentially have that entire caseload. And we know that, their caseload maybe tends to be about 10% of the general population, but you don't know which 10%. So universally, school psychologists have to be prepared to work with any children, child find federal laws and, response to intervention, et cetera. And so what I'm saying is practitioners need to be prepared very universally for all kids. And it tends to be, between 600 and 1,000 or more kids, which really makes the case for why we have to work very succinctly, briefly, with concise and excellent services for children and families. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm doing the advancing. I forgot. Let's see, back one. Sorry, can you go back? Okay, thanks, Grazia. This gives us, the student ratio for the United States, and you can see Arizona is 645. The least is Vermont with, I think, 171 students assigned to each mental health practitioner, whether school counselor or school psychologist. I mean, those are just incredible numbers. The recommendation from the American School Counseling Association is 250 children per practitioner, which again is just a gigantic caseload. As you may know, schools are set up where there are no appointments. So counseling centers and schools are walk-in services 100%, or as I used to say, drag-in services, often pulled by the ear by a teacher or parent, and with the kind of fix this kid for my convenience kind of agenda, which I, truly objected to. I wanted to know what the young person needed or wanted from this interaction. And it wasn't that, they could go please their math teacher or make their parent happy, but what did they need from this interaction? I think letting them set the goal and set the way. So additional obstacles, counselor availability was just a huge obstacle in my experience. Counselors were assigned laminating, subbing for teachers who were absent, arranging lunches, counting money for advanced placement tests, and structuring state-mandated academic assessments, which is a theft of service. It's a theft of service to kids and families and requires a lot of advocacy from mental health leaders to say, you are robbing kids of the services we are prepared to provide. And that was an ongoing battle that I fought for many years and still do to some extent. And I think a good way to mobilize is mobilizing parents. Do you want your kids to have someone to talk to who's a caring and well-trained, skilled adult? Some parents don't. They want to keep their kids isolated, but that's very few. Most parents do want their kids to have the best services possible. So I always try to mobilize the PTA. The PTA is right in there saying, we want our kids to be well served and to be safe, psychologically, mentally, emotionally safe. So yeah, I had bus duty for years when I was a school counselor, which I used to connect. I thought, okay, I can use this to high five kids and say, hey, my name is Debbie. How are you? Where are you going? What are you doing? So there are still ways to use some of these ridiculous services to connect with kids. So those are some of the reasons why SST in a school setting is just so imperative. You may never see a kid again. It may be that one-time thing. So high visibility was really important. And to address the other question of how do you connect? If you work in private practice or primary care, how do you get access to school folks? And what I recommend are open houses or coffee chats and setting those up, whether they could even be on Zoom or online for people's convenience. They're better in person, but trying to make those associations. So who are the nonprofits in my area? who else is doing this work in my region, in my zip code, and forming those connections before they're needed proactively, which also is huge in crisis work. We formed those connections before we needed them, so that when we needed them, we had listservs, we had each other's phone tree, phone numbers, and use your local associations. Like we have Bear County Psychological Association, going to happy hours or social events together and saying, okay, I'm in the schools. Where are you? Oh, you're at Santa Rosa Hospital. You're at primary care at the Robert B. Greene. You know, getting to know each other in advance in an intentional and focused way begins to build the fabric, especially in crisis situations. We had children who sadly died by suicide. We had a teacher hit by a bus who died in front of kids. We had a crisis, we can imagine with 100,000 kids, we had something happening all the time. We had to have a critical incident team ready and prepared to go and work with children they would see one time only. Some of it was critical incident debriefing. Some of it was just brief psychotherapy to address the immediate needs of kids who had witnessed and kids who have heard about. But either way, we're experiencing trauma and grief. And so we as a workforce went through specific training on how to address trauma and grief from evidence-based models, so that when we went out, we weren't just being, kind of kindly volunteers, but that we as school counselors were a well-trained workforce in addressing trauma and addressing grief with kids. And we did a lot of that work. So reflections, again, this from my work in the schools was sometimes teachers would oppose children leaving for counseling services. They would say, you know what, you can have this kid for 15 minutes and that's it. Which already puts a barrier up because you don't know how long you're going to need. I tried to always get in front of that with the principal and say, don't have somebody tie my hands behind my back. I need as much time as I need, but time is so of the essence. Then, sometimes there were teachers who wanted to know, what did they talk about? So obviously for confidentiality reasons, I'd say, you know what, if you need to know some specific information to really support this child, I'm going to be telling you everything that I can. But for right now, we're good. Parents may decline to sign for a second session. Under the Texas Family Code, Chapter 32, we've always been allowed to see children on an emergency basis one time without a parent consent. Our governor is changing that. I would say, come and sue me if you need to, but I would see a child without a parent consent in a crisis situation, which might involve running away or abuse or human trafficking or bullying or whatever that might be. I remember one time I saw 17 kids individually in an 8-hour day, all unrelated to each other. And so I had to be efficient with time. I had to really figure out how I could budget my energy because I didn't want student number 17 to have an exhausted, beleaguered human in front of him or her. So I think that too is a part of how do you budget your energy? How do you re-energize yourself for the work? If you're doing a lot of single session work in settings where you may be called upon to be on it. Now that was an atypical day, I grant you. But most days it would be 9 or 10 different sessions. And some would be an hour long, some might be 25 minutes long, some might be 2 hours long, depending on the needs. So relevance, we certainly know in the post-COVID climate, some kids have had a hard time adjusting to coming back to schools. How do we work with that, with maybe some social isolation, some difficulty in social skills, some anxiety? In the political climate with deportations happening around the United States, many kids are hypervigilant about that or experiencing separation anxiety. Should I go home? Will my parents still be there? and some really ambient anxiety that, you know, is there for themselves and others. Up to 80% of youth in the US with mental health needs receive no services at all. That's a pretty staggering number. And that's where, you know, if it's available in schools and they're not receiving it, again, to me, that could be a theft of service, or trying to remove those obstacles is really important. So barriers, cost, location, scheduling, cultural stigma, increased demands need to be thought about and addressed. And for many youth, their initial interaction with a mental health provider happens in school. That may be the first time, and they don't have to drive somewhere. They don't have to make an appointment, which I think provides a lot of convenience. And there's less stigma. They're used to talking to different teachers during the day. They have an art teacher, a math teacher. Some, you know, will compartmentalize as early as second grade. They have a science teacher, a history teacher. So kids are really pretty flexible and resilient in talking to different adults. And so I think that's really normalized. So again, walk-in services are definitely the way to go in schools. Appointments really don't exist in my experience. Kids are self-referred or referred by teachers, courts, school administrators for the most part. Yeah, kids don't, appointments are not made, and we've talked about caseloads already. The word cloud could expand and expand with the kinds of concerns children bring. And one of my most memorable interactions was with a youngster was he brought in a broken binder, a 3-ring binder, and he wanted to talk about why his binder didn't close correctly anymore. And my instinct was to go to the cupboard and get him a new binder. But I thought, no, just pause, take a breath. And so I asked him the why now question. I mean, how come now this binder is just so annoying? And he said, I don't know. I mean, maybe because my dad died last weekend. And I thought that's where making space and holding space for kids is so incredibly important. And so, of course, you know, we spent the time we needed to work through his feelings. What students think, you know, a lot of students think that 56% say the school thinks mental health services are important. 67% of kids wish they had a mental health day off, don't we all? Teens want school to play a bigger role in providing some services. And the kinds of concerns that kids bring, we already talked about anxiety, depression, behavioral disorders. You can see that the 12 to 17-year-old range is higher in anxiety and depression. The 6 to 11-year-old kiddos are experiencing more behavioral concerns, but also the other kinds of concerns are there, even with kids as young as 3 to 5 years of age, though the prevalence may be less. This is something I've reacted to real strongly recently, is what I call dosing from the courts. The courts will tell us this youngster needs 10 sessions. And this has really become very common in our region. I don't know about in other places. Is that true for other places? Okay, some of you are seeing that too. And what if all they need is a single session to get them pointed in the right direction? Why should we say, okay, you got to come back 9 more times, you know, to make the court happy? And I worry that kids either foster dependency or they have to make up difficulties that may not even be there, so they have something to talk about for 9 more hours. And so I've called that dosing, and really feel that judges should trust mental health practitioners to know how long that might be or how much that might take. Because in a sense, I think of it as milligrams. You need, you know, 2,000 milligrams of psychotherapy. And how does a judge know that? And how does that become a consequence rather than an invitation for change that might be accomplished in 1 session or 2 or 3? But the requirement of 10 I find very difficult. So that's, again, a conversation I'm having with the judges who are doing that in our region. Because it does make an assumption that positive change takes a long time. negative change can happen blink, blink. So why do we assume that positive change has to, does it have to stick? Is it more like Teflon coated that we can't make positive change? It just slides off. So, yeah, anyway, I could talk about that for a while. And then in the videos that you're going to see today, you're going to see video excerpts from my colleagues from Grazia and Joe, who are the two therapists in the session. They're working with a middle school student, and the issue of dependency kind of comes up, like, oh, I need to come back. I need you guys. I love you guys, that kind of thing with therapists. And, the way we look at that is kids attached to a teacher, and then they go to the next grade level and they have a new teacher. They attach to different specialists and the librarian. But these are people who rotate around their social world, but don't have to be just situated in their social world for them to keep going. So we work with from a single session mindset. Doesn't mean they don't come back, but it does mean that we want them to have time between the time we see them and another time if they return, that they have time to implement some of the new behaviors, try them on for size. If they want to come back, they can, but we don't assume we'll see you in 7 days. Okay, so I am going to turn it over to my esteemed colleagues who will walk you through a session and really kind of be the docents of how that session went.
Thank you so much, Dr. Healy. So before shifting gears, we were thinking about, I don't know if, yeah, we have. So before shifting gear, we were thinking about touching base on a few points, just because we.
Not sure this. It is.
Hello? Okay. All right.
You get any messages?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So a few points that we wanted to touch base that we think are important before starting to watch some of the clips, because it will not be the entire session. It will be just short clips to those points that we think are salient during the session. So we know that SST provide the opportunity to engage in encountering the client, not countering, and allows us to have a beginning, middle, and end. So it also allows us to work on the workable goals that the client is bringing to the session. So one question that we were thinking is, in what ways maybe your current model, if you think about it, align a little bit with SST? If anyone would like to share that.
Maybe we could have them
Mm-hmm.
have another shoulder chat for a minute and then like some ideas and then revisit. So yeah, so in what ways are maybe you already doing things in your respective settings that are kind of aligned with our SST delivery model? So it can be, it doesn't matter on the theoretical orientation that you're coming from, but that kind of that single session idea. So
Sounds like the sound from this is pretty poor. So moving forward, if you could use this, that would be great.
Okay, everyone. So now you've had a chance to chit chat with your neighbors, kind of brainstorming about how maybe what you're doing already can map out into the single session delivery model. What were a few thoughts that people had? Would you mind sharing?
I guess we have a shy audience today.
I'm shy too, it's okay.
International scholars right here. We've written multiple books. Yeah. I agree with you that there's often, this work is done almost by chance.
Yeah.
Without being able to describe it or speak about it in a particular way. That's great.
Yeah, I certainly, I'm with you there. Thank you for that comment, and Dr. Healy for sharing that. So I think it gets to that interesting idea of, many people, therapists are doing this kind of unintentionally. It's accidental. So it's if we do this work intentionally with purpose, think about the impact
Yeah,
that
and it
has.
makes a big impact, I think, for other school leaders, administrators, and parents for us to be able to describe our work very carefully. Otherwise, I think it might be like, oh, you just want to drop my child off after one interaction, or yeah.
I think the other thing is also that the missed opportunity for the expertise that school counsellors have perfected, and that as researchers, giving the opportunity for that to even push the field of SSTs forward. So it's not just us sort of coming and saying this is something you can be doing, it's learning from what they've perfected and bringing that into the research space and the evidence base as well. Yeah, so it's the cooperation and the two-way dialogue, not just researchers and psychologists training saying you should do this better. It's how can we learn from what you're already doing very well.
Sessions at ACA, the American Counseling Association, or other counseling associations are there SST sessions, and they're hard to come by. Monty and I did one a few years ago for a regional conference for school counselors, but it's super hard to come by. So I think infiltrating those spaces also maybe helps to build that knowledge base. Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts that people, did I see other hands?
Somebody from the audience?
We'll make sure the audience mic is on moving forward.
So, and this brings us also a little bit back to, it's linked to the video that you will be watching, but also the conversation that we've been having based on like clients, in this case, students, you know, that usually are brought to the school counselor, maybe by the teacher, maybe something happened. Sometimes students have difficulty, you know, doing walk-ins because maybe the door is locked. They should be like waiting outside the door. Other students may be watching them. So there is the embarrassment. And already from some of the statistics that Dr. Healy showed, lots of students in the different age groups have high anxiety. So that would allow them maybe to refrain from seeking help. And they would like to have more mental health education, which would allow them to also feel more comfortable. So something that we would like to talk about is how we can also make and address that comfort within one session, because change can happen even in one session.
So we were, as we were preparing for this, we were wondering, in your experience, and it could be in schools, I know we have some other settings represented, what's the experience been like with mandated clients, or sometimes I like to say voluntold clients? How does that, what's that been like for you? How does that change your approach? Or have you ever had a client that only just needed the one session? And things felt like they were moving in the right direction. Any thoughts, examples about that? Yeah, please.
So I'm with the Florida Institute for Child Welfare, and so we deal a lot with, like, our entire population has court-ordered therapy for the most part. Whether I'm working with the family of origin, the caregivers in the system, or with the children. I'm not a direct provider at this time, but this is like an ongoing discussion, right, of like this court-ordered therapeutic space. So it's just, it's a difficult thing to navigate, but especially because the system in general creates these forced single sessions, right, where you have kids because they're being moved a lot or going to different places or the schools and all of that. So yeah, this is a very relevant concept for me.
Yeah, I think that's that's a subset of clients that's really important to acknowledge. Like it's like you said, the forced single session due to the high mobility. Did you have something?
In my experience, clients also want to get the 10 sessions done in 5 days sometimes. So they want to come 2 times per day so that they can check it off the list and be done with the courts, which also just kind of accelerates this process in a way that just is unnatural because they're just going to jam 10 sessions into 5 days or something. And so it's perfunctory. It's like a drive-by. It's not brief in the way that it should be. It's just condensed to make the court happy.
And we find that a lot with the like therapeutic interventions for perpetrators, like so for perpetrating parents who have to go through their case plan, for example.
The mandating of the 10 sessions in Australia comes from the significant lobbying of the Professional Association for Clinical Psychologists. Now, Australia is a very unique place because we have universal health care and you can get rebated 10 sessions. And so there's significant lobbying by our clinical psychs to get these sessions so that people can operate their private practices. And so we have professional disciplines competing against each other, and therefore an unintended consequence of getting that access to care is degrading what can be done in a session, even though they have shown in Australia that the median number of sessions is only around 4. And I do wonder with school and single sessions around how you balance what's happening outside of the discipline and the lobbying and the advocacy from other areas of clinical psych, and what that means for, as you said, for what can be done in a single session.
Yeah, and going back to what you just said, SST is not about speed. It's about intentionality, right? How we can make good use of the time we have available. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, so we'll be able to start with some of our videos now. Right, so obviously, as Dr. Healy has shared so far, there's a number of challenges present in school settings when it comes to offering counseling services. It's complex. The statistics, indicate that our school counselors and school psychologists are spread so thin with gigantic caseloads and large and very broad job duties, bus duty included. What we have in these upcoming videos are some segments of a session that Grazia and I did as co-therapists in, we think, spring 2023. We were a little green then in the single session world. But it's a good example of a school-aged, I think probably middle school-aged young lady who is not a court-mandated client, but a parental kind of obligation client, and even so much so that she was really caught off guard by the session happening that day. It sprung on her just before that. So we navigate some of those bumps in the road at the beginning.
It's a teletherapy session.
Yes, it is a telehealth session, and this clip will show a little bit how we begin to identifying a problem, trying to co-constructing a goal with the client. Even as Joe mentioned, the student arrived off guard, didn't know even that the session was scheduled. I was wondering, so what do you wish would be different as a result of the talk with me and Joe today?
If this was more planned out, I think maybe I'd be a little bit more comfortable. But like since I didn't know that this was going to happen that much or what was going to happen, I'm like kind of like wondering what's going to happen and kind of on edge and stuff like that. But as we're talking more, I'm getting a lot more comfortable.
I'm glad to hear you're starting to feel more comfortable. I'm impressed, you know, that since this is kind of thrown on you, like you're a little kind of surprised by the meeting, like that I think you should be proud of yourself that you're talking this much, you know? Yeah. Especially considering, like, you know, you said in these there's some friend things and fake friends and stuff. So I think this shows that you're putting some real effort into this conversation right now. Yeah, we appreciate that.
I get good vibes from people, and you all seem like very nice people. So I'm hoping and believing that I can trust you all and stuff like that.
Thank you for saying that.
Talk to these people. Sorry, what I was saying is her mom pushed her into the session, made the appointment, and then just said, "Okay, come sit here and talk to these people." Which I think Joe and Grazia did a lovely job of joining throughout the session to help the student or the youngster become have it more normalized and become comfortable. Nice job. Thank you.
And so some themes to keep in mind, you know, as this young client is bringing them up, are she has what she calls fake friends, and so there's later on she'll go on to reference some bullying at school. So a lot of stress for her is being built up throughout a school day. So this is obviously after a school day that we're doing this session. I don't know, probably about what 7 p.m. or something in the evening.
Also, but she would turn her camera on until she felt pretty comfortable with it being there.
Yeah. So what Dr. Healy is saying is that initially she was so uncomfortable that she wouldn't even turn her camera on, and that'll be, I think, maybe the next clip. So we'll be able to.
And so it's also like, how do we balance, structure, but also the freedom, when students don't walk in maybe with a clear, problem, or maybe with a clear idea what to expect, what is going to happen. I don't know if any of you have had this experience in your practice, but Joy and I, when we worked with her, we thought about how can we make sure that we do not push away further, the student. Dr. Healy mentioned that the client was a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning. That's my Italian language kicking in sometimes. I apologize. And so what we could do to make sure and allow the time for her to decide at her own terms, to be ready.
On camera.
Do you feel
think it-
uncomfortable with the camera on now?
I mean, I don't mind. It's just, I guess it's really up to y'all. Like,
What makes you comfortable?
staying off camera for a bit.
Okay. Then maybe if later on you feel more comfortable, maybe you can turn it on later.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, feel free to take your time, and if there's other things that you think of that we can do to make this this hour more comfortable for you, we're more than happy to hear them. So, and do our best to accommodate. Anybody had an experience like this? I know this is kind of unique to telehealth, obviously. If you're in person, you don't have to worry about, I guess you could come on like holding something in front of your face, but anybody had any experiences like this with students where just so uncomfortable, maybe because they were surprised to be there, or just didn't know what to expect, didn't really kind of know the I don't know, the quote unquote rules of therapy? Any experiences like that we could elicit from the audience?
Yeah, so I do mostly assessments, but this particular assessment was with a kiddo and her mom she had her drawstrings and her hoodie pulled tight to where you could only see this. And it was, I mean, as we went through the assessment, we figured out that it was because every assessment they'd done thus far had separated her from her mom through child services. And so she had a lot of trauma talking to people. So unworking that in like 90 minutes, which is about the time I spend on an assessment. Yeah, it was tough. But by the end of it, the hoodie was still on, but like here, so I could see eyes, which is a win. So
Definitely a win. Okay, so that's the equivalent in in-person work. Yeah, the drawstrings and the hoodie. Yeah. So in this, oh, thank you.
I just want to comment on how elegant that the way that you handled that wasn't whether or not she would turn the camera on. It was when she would turn the camera on. And I think even in other settings, we have people that kids and adults both, they might be uncomfortable with any part of the session. And you did a nice job of not saying, no, these are the rules, this is the way it's going to be done. You signed a consent form and all of that. But yeah, a lot of people would be uncomfortable in this kind of a situation. And you just made it a question of when she would turn the camera on, and that would be and when she got comfortable. And so that was very nicely done.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Grazia, you knocked that one out of the park. Yeah.
Trusted the client.
Mhm.
So we made sure that we could build rapport over there. And so trusting the client is very fundamental to make sure that we can build the therapeutic alliance. And so allowing her space at her own term to decide when to turn the camera, we thought it was very helpful moving on later in the session. And you will see why in a few the clips later.
Should we go to the next one?
May I ask you a question? Because I see that you have a very colorful like background, and I'm wondering what is it? If maybe if you would like to share it. It's a
Me and my
unicorn.
me and my sister, we like rainbow colors. We like unicorns and stuff like that. So we had this idea when we were in our last apartment to make our whole room based off of colorful unicorns and stuff like that. We had an option to make our room sea themed, like mermaid themed, or unicorn themed. We decided on unicorns.
How did you make that decision?
It was actually, if I'm being honest, pretty hard because we were sitting there and we were at Walmart trying to get bed sheets and my mom asked, she was like, which one do you want to get? The unicorns or the mermaids? And we were like, well, making a sea decorated bedroom is going to be kind of hard. But then when you try and get a whole bunch of stuff from Dollar Tree with rainbows and stuff like that, it's like 10 times more easier. So we picked the unicorns and then we had a whole bunch of fun decorating up the room. We have lights like around the room. If I were to turn off the light that I have on now and then plug in the lights there would be all rainbow lights around the room.
Wow, yeah, you spared no expense. There's rainbows all over. That's great. How long have you had all that decoration up?
From the time we moved here to our last apartment, so 2 years.
So this is kind of the first moment. Obviously, she had her camera on because we could see the unicorn. Sorry, that was blurred out. If I was more tech savvy, I would have only had her face blurred. But so we're starting to see. Well, Grazia is starting to see around the room and makes the observation that there's these unicorns, and it's the first moment that our client is kind of speaking without much. Without being too guarded. She's really going for it. It's one of our longer clips because she keeps sharing. And so like more traditional delivery models might have some concern with with single session therapy because the criticism or the concern might be that, oh, you can't build enough rapport to start talking about the important stuff and making changes and yada yada. But this is an example of building rapport via unicorns, I guess. Unicorns and rainbows and lights, and of course, in a perfect world, we get to sort of have the benefit of hindsight, and there's lots of great language this young lady brings about how she and her sibling, picked this unicorn theme. They went to Walmart and the dollar store. And as we were preparing for this, Grazia and I were thinking, well, we could have come back at her with a metaphor or an analogy to help us start helping her identify like what her goal is. Okay, so you made this this decision, this big decision that's going to about the decoration in your room. And so, Grazia, I don't remember how we phrased this question, but
How were you able to make the decision, given that it was like challenging for her back then? And so using that, so it's utilization again, because by joining and showing interest at the same time, we can incorporate language, metaphor that aligns with what the client is bringing to the session. And so, of course, we were not as seasoned there, but reviewing the clip, we thought about those things, how maybe later on we could have used it, because it seems that she was having hard time deciding on like a workable goal for this specific session, just because she was caught off guard.
So, any other thoughts about this? I mean, because if anybody has questions, we're happy to pause on any specific clip. Otherwise,
We can ask the question.
great.
Thanks, Joe. And Grazia. I really loved how you picked up from the sharing and the little bit that was kind of offered into some of the patterns and possible strengths and ways of navigating a particular point and it wasn't problem focused. It was just another natural point. And I think it reminded me not of a specific example, but we are often doing telehealth work but in a family therapy setting, and often wrestling with how much connecting space to give because of the time limits. And I'm frequently reminded that such kind of gold nuggets come out of that general kind of engaging space that later come to influence what either is taken away from or shapes what you might be able to offer as ideas or pathways kind of forward. And so I loved how you kind of picked up from the sharing and steered it towards some of that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Those joining via those gold nuggets, I like that, happen throughout. So yeah, I don't remember exactly when this clip was, but there's other things like that too throughout this where these little moments, these bright shining moments happen.
I was wondering, you just mentioned, that about, like happiness, and that sometimes you kind of tell yourself to switch, direction, and instead of thinking about a happy thought, maybe the opposite. But I'm wondering, what do you do to stop, avoid, that maybe those not so happy thoughts, overrule, when you have like the happy thought. I don't know if Jogi, you can help me reframe that.
Grazia, are you asking how she uses her more positive thoughts to sort of
How she prevents of having,
show up for her?
the not happy thought overcome the happy thought. You use more like the happy thought rather than allowing, the not so happy thought to step in.
Oh, so you're asking how do I use my happy thoughts instead of my negative thoughts, like over my negative thoughts? Okay. Usually when I do that, it's like I don't really notice it. I'll just catch myself thinking about something positive, like getting home to go lay in my bed finally after a long 7-hour day of school. And I'll be like, I'm so happy to just finally go to bed and just relax after having a day full of drama and stuff like that. Or I'll think about being able to go to lunch and talk to my friends and everything like that, which makes me like 10 times more happier to complete the day. And, it just keeps me going thinking about how I'll get to see my friends, or I'll be home just relaxing in bed, looking at my phone or watching TV.
It sounds kind of like the happy thoughts catch you off guard in a good way. Like they sort of show up for you when without even you trying to find them.
Yes, that does happen a lot.
It gives me this image of like your happy thoughts being sort of like on your team, or they kind of act like your friends even. The friends that notice that you're having a hard time and reach out to you and they're like, hey, you deserve help too.
Yes, I can see what you're saying.
Really got to coping and resources without having to use. I feel like you got to coping and resources and strategies without having to use that kind of language with the client. And rather than being an eradication goal, how do you get rid of? It became a positive, affirmative kind of goal instead of the absence of something, the presence of something. How do you do that? And I love that you embodied it as a person. Oh, it's like that shows up as your friend. And I think the happy thoughts was her language, not our language, injected into the session. So I thought that was masterful. Thank you both.
Yeah, and I think that Joy and I were just looking to find exceptions to use. Just because, as Dr. Healy mentioned, being able to bring, the strength and resources that already the client possess is very helpful to make sure that even the only one session we had available with her was meaningful.
Yeah. And it's an example of even when your therapists are stumbling over the words for a minute and a half, sometimes clients come and save you. They summarize it all. Oh, right. So you mean, yeah. So thank you. Bye.
They do it quite a lot with me because I so
Yeah. Clients are good supervisors. Yes.
I really appreciated that you used some of her language because I just kept thinking, how she's feeling in front of two white therapists and she being, I don't know her race or anything, but it seems like African American. And I think that using the language that people use in the session is very, very key to build rapport and to make them laugh or to connect those things that they're like, right? So I think it seems like she's feeling more comfortable. And maybe that's why she has a blur camera, she's not there yet still.
Yeah, the blur was in the edits for confidentiality. Yeah. Mhm.
Just the second clip, it was all black in the screen, but then the other one where it's faded, we just faded.
Yeah, I was just saying that in the session, we could see her clearly. Joan Grazia decided to blur it for confidentiality reasons.
But thank you. And thank you for the point about the client language. That's something that we always try to do instead of clients having to adopt the whatever the language of psychotherapy is. It's easier and more efficient for clients if we adopt their language. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this will be an example where we'll showcase some SST language and some themes of hope will emerge. Oh, I think I found a way to to use some of your communication skills. Really, yeah, that's maybe a good way to put a number of your helping skills. They come down to your good communication skills, which are also pretty evident tonight. How you can advocate for yourself and explain what's going on, those kinds of things.
I was actually very grateful that I was able to talk to her about it, because when I was able to talk to her about it, it was like a wave of reassurance came over me, and I was actually a lot happier than what I was usually.
So from this short clip, we see how the client is having hope. She showed that actually she was advocating for herself. She found the strength, which once again provides exceptions, shows us what resources and strength the clients possess. And we find very helpful to incorporate up language during our session, just because hope, as you know, besides being just a positive emotion, it also relates to therapeutic alliance, motivation, and many studies in the literature shows that also like therapeutic compliance, therapeutic outcomes are much in percentage better than those that do not include hope regarding like the present and the future. So it becomes the client like agent of change in action.
Yeah, well said, Grazia. Thank you. So we were kind of curious, maybe if you all kind of discuss amongst yourselves for a minute and kind of brainstorm, what are some signs, whether it's in school-based or other settings, what are some signs that you might notice that hope is kind of blossoming or being operationalized in a session? What are some ways that you can pay attention to that, look out for it?
Wonderful. Yeah, sure. For them to do that, we don't necessarily. Okay. They might say this one, two, three, four. But it was your first time.
All right.
Hey, everyone.
Okay, everyone. So we're curious to hear what you were able to share with your colleagues and what maybe signs you may notice about hope being operationalized in your settings, in a session that maybe you have had with some of your clients. If you maybe are shy and you would not like to share, we wanted to give briefly a little background. So why we incorporate hope in our session, why we use this language. Well, as you know, Lambert, 1992, just quoting precisely, he identified the extra-therapeutic factors, right? And those are a 40% basically account 40% for the improvement that the client has. However, the remaining percentages are divided in 15% hope, 30% therapeutic alliance. That's why for us it's very important to make sure that we build that rapport with the client, making sure that the client is comfortable. And then the remaining 15% is the therapeutic model that anyone use. So as you can see, hope and the therapeutic approach that is used has the same impact. And so this is one of the reasons why we look for not only extra therapeutic factors, such as, some of the variables, the client strength, resilience. At times we even look for spirituality, faith, But in the case of the clients, you didn't have much of the background, right? So we mentioned that the client is being bullied. So the reason why she came out to see us is because apparently that bullying has not been addressed in the school settings. Actually, when she had to meet with the school principal and vice principal for a different situation, the mom brought up to them the question, so how about this? So they were not aware of the bullying. The client had not seen a school counselor because there was not availability. And that's why mom had scheduled an appointment without telling the kid and bringing her to therapy, because she wanted to make sure that her child is being, cared for, especially thinking about maybe mental health, consequences of bullying.
Yeah. And so the client and her mother had already, had a few different attempts at solving this problem by interacting with school officials, but they weren't obviously satisfied with that, with the lack of intervention. So let's see. So this next one is about some change that the client a theme of change that she begins to discuss.
Remember that when we started to talk about, Joe said that we were going to have a little consultation break. We're getting closer to that time. So I was wondering what has worked for you so far, like during our conversation? What did you find helpful?
I found it helpful with how sweet you both were being the whole time while I was talking, and how you both were sitting there relating to things that I was also talking about, which made me feel like I was actually being heard for once in my 12 years on this earth. And then,
Wow.
I'm sorry.
No.
It's Joe that likes to talk a lot.
I do. I'll just mute myself for a minute and give you a chance. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Sad. I also enjoyed, getting to actually meet people, even if they are like older than me, who would sit there and help me feel like everything's gonna be okay for once. Because I don't really get that a lot from others. So I thank you both like so much for actually listening, because it actually made me feel a lot more happier than what most people do.
Well, you're pretty easy to listen to.
And thank you for your words.
Okay. Yeah. So despite me interrupting her constantly, she goes on to express this kind of perspective shift that she's happening. She's feeling happier than before. She's feeling, what did she say? Being heard for once in my 12 years on this earth. So change is happening within this one encounter. It's probably maybe pushing the 40-minute mark, I'd guess, like if I remember correctly. Do you have other thoughts?
Yeah.
Thanks, sorry.
Was this post-reflecting team? You're getting ready for it. Okay. And so we use a reflecting team model. I was the supervisor in this interaction, and we use a reflecting team model that we'll talk about a little bit more and as Grazia and Joe have already talked about, it was kind of hope-informed care. We listen for hope, use presuppositional language that infuses hope into the session rather than asking her, how bad did it get? What was the bullying like? Who bullied you the most? Blah, blah, blah. We wanted to really help her move up and out of, that cycle so that she could talk about what was going well and through hope-informed care, really mobilize herself in the directions of her choice. And so our reflecting team, you'll see is part of what infuses some of that into the session. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, that's set pretty well for the next one. Do you have any other thoughts, Grazia? Okay.
With that being said, would you like to join us and listen to what our colleagues would say, or would you prefer to go on a waiting room?
I would like to sit and listen.
Perfect.
I'm so glad that had this conversation and that she felt heard and seen and known. And like Joe said, it was such an easy way to connect with her. She's so creative and sharing. And I also think about how all people have to bring those skills to help themselves. I wonder how other people in life use skills to help themselves. And she certainly has a lot of great skills.
Yeah, I have to agree with what Dr. Healy is saying. The fact that she had mentioned earlier that she wasn't really aware that today was going to happen, and still being willing to like show up and be so open, and even like her understanding like her own like boundaries of like when she wanted to turn on the camera when she was ready, and being that open, and also her always like putting other people first and wanting to make sure everybody else is good and happy.
Yeah, I would agree too. Like, I admire how willing she is to kind of still continue to trust people in spite of some of the difficult and challenging experience she has been through. You know, part of me kind of wonders, like, I wonder how, whenever she helps other people, how she gives them hope. I think that's such a, maybe an interesting thing to maybe look into. Another thing too, I was kind of interested in is like, how her art expresses her and kind of says a lot about her in the moments whenever maybe she just decides not to say as much. But those are some of the couple of things that I kind of noticed. And I also kind of wonder too, how much of an important resource and pillar she is to her community.
I would add that is very brave, first of all. And of course, advocating for herself is a big thing. And I'm super proud of for doing that. And secondly, as what my colleague mentioned, being creative is very creative. I was wondering how, in what ways does creative arts help her make her happy? And what are some other creative thoughts that keep her happy inside and gives her that positivity, encouragement, and the boldness? So just exploring those areas will be great. So I would just encourage to continue looking into, expressing herself and continue moving with her creative arts ability.
And so a few things from this clip and also the previous one, we can see how the client is shifting also from, and she mentioned that from not feeling heard and seen to feeling heard and seen. A change that make her go from what is unsure to the future about being, hopeful, the change is possible. And she mentioned being happier than before within not even an hour.
And so what we call, this, when the team shows up, is the reflecting team, as Dr. Healy explained. And so we were kind of wondering, in different settings, obviously, this, type of reflecting team isn't necessarily possible everywhere, but it does do a really good job of being able to operationalize hope, and it's kind of a demonstration to the client that many people are able to see this, these strengths, these resiliencies, et cetera, in you. Kind of wondering if anybody or what ideas you all might have about kind of modifying this approach to fit one way or another in your respective settings, or maybe does anybody have any experience doing anything like this in counseling settings? Please.
This was so interesting to see. I've never seen an approach like this done before. So I would love to just hear a little bit more about like what the rationale for the reflecting team is, how you introduce it to the client, because I could see some like potential of like a team being caught off guard by, wait, there are people watching me. And just the co-therapy for the SST in general, I'm super curious about. So sorry if that derails too much.
Thanks. I have this microphone, Andy. So reflecting team is something that was certainly included in my doctoral training in the 1990s, representing the work of Tom Anderson, and also really representing the voice of the populace, the person on the street in a sense, and people who have no vested interest in lying to you. They don't know you from anywhere. And so it gives her, the way it was explained to me long ago by Glenn Gardner was that in a sense, it's almost the Greek chorus that is over here, saying whatever it is they say. It's perspective giving. And so many times I've heard clients say, they have no reason to lie to me. I don't even know. And we set it up at the beginning of the session. We say, we could take a consultation break at the mid-session, which we will. You could be part of it and listen in. Or you could be placed in a waiting room, or if now, of course, we're all in person. This was kind of in the COVID era. We can go into another room and have our consultation time, or we could invite the team into this room. And I would say 98% of the time, and I do reflecting team offers always, clients almost always say yes. I want to listen in. I want to be like a fly on the wall. I want to know what people think about me. Because often people are wondering, what do others think about what's going on? It's relational. I think and I like to work very relationally. People don't live in jars or in isolation. I think it helps contextualize. And so we now are entering the room because that's been the client's preference. So we form a little circle in the room. We don't speak to the client directly because we're not their therapists. We're people on the street. And so we form a little circle, a semicircle, and we talk to each other. We try to keep it brief, 5 to 6 minutes, and we leave. And then the co-therapist, we do use a co-therapy model in our clinic. The co-therapist will ask, what do you make of that, if anything? What jumped out or whatever. And clients will sometimes pick or pull a thread or a theme that was relevant for them, that was cogent for them. Or maybe they'll contest something and say, no, I'm not brave. You see me as brave? No, I'm really scared, but I'm just keep on trucking. So we ask, well, what does that say about you? So that hopefully they can name their own strengths rather than we providing affirmation that they can self-affirm. And so it's something that I've been doing for the last, I don't know how many, couple of decades. Sure.
So I'm curious for the 2% of the clients who decline to stay in the room.
Yes.
Like, what do you do with that process? And I'm also wondering, like, just as a resource perspective, how many people do you usually have? Is there a minimum number of people in the reflecting team? Just because they're listening in on the session for the full, I don't know how long this lasts, but, and then I had one more question that just totally escaped me. So
Okay, so the number of folks, I try to kind of manage that by the client's capacity to have a lot of people in the room. I mean, if some clients are managing a lot of anxiety, they may not want to see 6 people. Our teams are 6 people behind the mirror and 2 in the room, so 8 people. So we really talk about that. Maybe it's only 3 people who go in because we don't want, and other clients, like they seem really receptive to a large number. You can ask them. They know at the beginning that there are people behind the mirror and people in the room. So they know the training team right from the start. We don't want any surprises. I think that's a huge part of informed consent, that they understand and know this. For those who say, you know what, I'd rather not, no problem whatsoever. So then the 2 co-therapists leave the room for, again, 5 to 7 minutes, consult with the team, and come back and say, here are some of the thoughts and threads from the team. What resonates? What do you think? And so it's an infusion of perspectives and ideas, because we think 6 heads are better than 1, and we want to work very relationally. And I think that almost is the meta-relational aspect of bringing in the voice probably of the populace in a sense.
and then I don't want to monopolize. So just one last question that I remembered is, the co-therapy model and the reflecting team, just because there's a lot of rationale for single sessions because of the stretched, limited resources we have in a lot of real world practice settings. And so wondering how you see this model fitting in with like just the real world practice. And I'm imagining a lot of places don't have the capacity to have, 7, 8 people in a session.
When I was a school counselor, I didn't have a co-therapist and I didn't have a team. I didn't have any of that. So I would use a whiteboard and say, we're at about a mid-session now, and time is a great resource. What are we thinking right here now at the mid-session that jumps out at us, that's salient, that's important? And sometimes kids would draw it. It wouldn't be words, it would be a picture. But it gave us a jumping off point for the second part of the session that might be more about problem solving and hope infusion, and gave us material. And oftentimes kids would take a picture of it with their cell phone so that they could take the therapy out of the room, because it's those other 167 hours in a week that really where the rubber meets the road. So you could use a whiteboard for reflection. You could just reflect out into the air. I've tried it lots of different ways, but I like to have a reflective portion that is potentially summative, but also a launch point for the second half of the session that really mobilizes their strengths and gets them moving out. You're welcome.
And going back to what has already been shared, so when Joy and I are in different settings, so we're not in our Lady of the Lake Community Counseling Service Clinic. In our work, we are by ourselves, right? And so what we do, actually, we bring in the session, for example, in important others. So we may ask, well, if your mother was sitting here, like next to you, what she would say by hearing, what you just, mentioned. And so we invite the clients to just, think about what other people would say. So we not necessarily need to have a team to actually make use of this, technique. And then it was mentioned already the whiteboard, but we could also maybe write some note cards with reflection, another way to bring outside of the room, some of the conversation that was shared.
Okay. Should we hop over to the next one? And so this video, just to kind of cue you in, right? So next step. So it's right after, like immediately following what we just watched.
As we're getting close to the end of the session, I was wondering, what are some things that you heard tonight that you would like to tell yourself?
That I'm a helper and that I'm brave and creative.
That's a
I
good.
can't think of any others.
Good.
And what do you think that maybe to add a little bit more, like to go from, like, I don't know, if we should give a smiley face to this moment, what could you do to make it even a little bit smiler, that face that will show you that you can tell yourself more good things so that they resonate with you?
I actually don't know. Like, if I'm being 100% honest, I don't know. Like, I'm not usually used to having faith or hope in myself, so I'm not really used to telling myself these things until I finally got into the routine of telling myself them every morning. I mostly tell myself these things because I know that I'm about to sit here and go into a whole wave of drama, and there are going to be other people who are going to expect me to give them the help that they need. And I can't do that if I'm feeling sad or down, because I won't be giving the good advice that helps everybody every time they ask for it.
How might you remind yourself of those three things that you those three words that you used to describe yourself tonight? Helper, brave, and creative.
How helpful are they?
How might you remind yourself of those?
I
moving
guess
forward after this.
like I could look back on this conversation that we've had and just think about how all of you very nice people have called me all these very nice things.
I don't know how many of you with youth have heard I don't know answers. Like I hear many times, I don't know, which make me freeze a little bit at the beginning. It's like, oh shoot, what do I do next? I don't know too. So we are in the same spot. But once again, I think that the lesson learned from us is that the reflecting theme, but also like exceptions, the use of hope language, setting, like the goals, the joining throughout. It's just a way to make good use of our time, especially if there is, just one session available, which doesn't need to be a whole hour, can be even less, especially in the school settings, given that the school counselor may be like pulled in different direction. And another thing is that we tend to think throughout the session to do more of what is already working. So, and we do not like walk into doors that may be unknown. We try to walk into doors that the clients open up for us. And of course, to do that, we need to be able to listen. And in this case, our client told us that it was easier because she felt heard.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we hope the video clips have been helpful. Grazia's getting tired of having her face pop up on the screen. So, as we're coming up on the end, we've talked about challenges and barriers and everything as it pertains to counseling in schools and these services. So I wanted to end this with a little bit of solution talk, really. So time is a crucial resource. Only, maybe 8-ish hours in a workday. Maybe it's a longer workday sometimes. But time is a crucial resource, but a lot can happen in a brief encounter with we'll say student in this case.
Yeah, now to me, like the second bullet point is like avoid believing that there is a magic formula because actually there is not. Each session is its own, right? So you need to work that magic in that moment with what shows up, right?
Mhm. And the importance of, kind of with that, the ethical sides that we had about don't protract care when it becomes counter therapeutic. So we don't need to drag it on, when goals have already been achieved. We believe that positive change can happen just as swiftly as negative change. So if there's, if we can have something, bad happens that ruins our day, or is that there's I don't know, traumatizing or something, like why can't positive change also happen just as swiftly? We always do our best to use presuppositional language. That was a point that Dr. Bobel had made earlier. And using strengths-based approaches. If we use this presuppositional, that's a really hard word to say, presuppositional language, we can help our clients start thinking in that solution direction. Well, that's kind of similar to the next one. Helping our clients get pointed in the right direction. You don't have to finish the marathon, in this time with us, but we can make sure you're headed in the right direction by the time that we're done with this. And then check-ins or return sessions can be as needed.
So after, spending these almost 2 hours together, we are curious to know, who maybe in your community could benefit, from SST training, how, could be maybe embedded, in your settings, and maybe what resources or permission would be needed to implement in your own settings. Basically single session intervention, right? So I don't know if you would like to talk about it with some of the folks sitting next to you, and maybe we can have a group chat about it before wrapping up.
So one of the tabs in the web browser is like a QR code for people to fill out like name, email, and role if they want to potentially get the CEUs. What? No. It could be after that, or just like if we could, yeah, I could show you. It's like it's just, and then if Deborah wants to explain what happened. Oh, did he close? Oh no, here it is. Yeah, these are all done. Yeah, so if you just show this, and then if Deborah wants to like explain it all, but it's just her, yeah. This one. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So I hope you had the time to get a little break from listening our voices. I need to be more decisive. Okay, I can do that. All right. Clapping. All right. If I can have your attention for just 9 more minutes. So, so I don't know if you had like anything that you would like to share, like maybe some thoughts that you had after, like this workshop, or something that you think maybe could benefit others by listening, what you share. Otherwise, we're going to hand the mic to Dr. Healy. Yeah. Oh, do have a question. We do have a brave person in the back.
I was just reflecting with lots of trainings that I've been doing around single session is the importance of trying to invite all levels of service into those trainings, so including managers, CEOs, the people who are going to advocate for you on the ground around the funding you need, the supervision support that should be part and parcel of a service delivery model, but is often seen as just at the side or, so more and more I have been talking to services about make sure you invite the manager in because single session thinking is relevant to non-clinicians too. It can be used for running good meetings, for delivering supervision. And in fact, the day before I left to come here, the service I'm doing a couple of days work with actually invited me to present to the CEO and the board and a 1-hour presentation on single session. So for me, that was a wonderful opportunity to ensure they were out there advocating with knowledge about what single session is and what people on the ground are delivering and how helpful it is, some statistics, some data to get more funding and because I think many times clinicians go to training, get really excited about these ideas, go back to the workplace and can't proceed with it because of all the challenges put in the way for them to actually take that passion forward. So I think we sometimes set clinicians up to fail, they go to these trainings, they get really enthusiastic and then have no support on the ground to deliver in a way that's meaningful, helpful, fits with scope of practice, all of those things. Yeah, so that would be my reflection about training is it has to be more than just to the clinical service staff. It needs to really be to all levels of services to ensure, the young people or clients are getting the best service, really. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly a multi-level training.
Yeah, thanks. So just one thing I just wanted to mention, I don't think has been said yet, but when you're talking, especially early on, about for students in particular, this is true for people in general, but students who are often reluctant to have this meeting, to have this conversation, that just knowing that this is planned to be one meeting makes it easier for many people to walk in that door. Okay.
That was actually my question. I'm curious around what you all sort of think after working this for so long, how important you think it is to be very clear in labeling these as single sessions with not only the young people, but with the school community, and how important you think that is to actually move the field forward in getting respect from consumers, school communities, and the broader psychological community that this is effective and this is what we call it, given that most clinicians will sort of say, we're going to try CBT, we're going to try this particular approach. So I'm just curious on how important you think that is for the field.
I think it's super important because people will say, oh, it's like one and done, like what they used to criticize the single card Rorschach or whatever. Yeah, I think it's super important that there's an understanding that positive change can happen in one, that we don't have wait lists, that it addresses health disparities, that we widen the scope and make communities safer by having the availability of services in this manner. And we do single session talk at the beginning of the session so that clients know that most people find one session to be sufficient to help them start moving in the right direction. And we know the modal number of sessions that an individual attends, if they attend at all, is one. And so it makes sense to normalize that. And so in a way, we're addressing what already exists. And I think super important. Monty?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, we have been wrestling with calling it single session therapy for years. Everybody in the room probably knows that. And I think it's really important that when we talk about that, it's not one and only session. It's not single session, one and only. It's one at a time. We'll do this one session at a time. And that is much more palatable to a lot of people, because when we say single session, people think it's just one and only. Yeah, and one and no more. And Debbie did a good job of saying at the beginning we say that, and we also add to that, many people find one is helpful, that we'll talk again at the end of this session to see how we did. And if more is needed, we'll talk about that at the end of the session. And so that takes the pressure off everybody.
And we also schedule for 3 weeks if they do decide they want to come back, 2 or 3 weeks. We don't want to necessarily say, okay, come back next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. It gives them some time to actually mobilize and operationalize what they're working on in the real world.
Just a quick question that I have is sort of like, how do you conceptualize the difference between a single session therapy versus consultation? Consultation could be one session or it could be multi-session as well. And so I was wondering if folks in the room had like a distinct sort of definition for the two.
That's right.
Yeah, I actually like thinking of it as a consultation, because one advantage of in a consultation, the consultee is the decision maker. So I actually prefer that as a way of thinking about this. Yeah.
Any others for Q&A? We're almost, yes.
Do you see any opportunities for AI model to offer? Because I feel like AI is really good at reflecting. Sometimes it needs to be trained in it to highlight like what you're talking about, hope or strengths-based, but would that be a way to fill that gap?
It might be. I have not thought about that. I think I probably have, I don't know, maybe I have some bias against it replacing the person. I mean, I think there are ways to sift for themes and ideas that could be augmented by AI, but I wouldn't want to see it replace it, the human connection. So it's just my own bias.
That's fair.
Thanks for the interesting question. I think we're close to being out of time. We just wanted to let you know that's our contact information. Those are our email addresses. We offer free mental health first aid certification, adult focused or youth focused. I have a grant. I need to use up $500,000 by September 2026. We are willing to train. It's on Zoom. It's all on Zoom. It's mostly Friday and Saturday mornings, 5 hours. So if you want to do mental health first aid certification, good for 3 years, just email Grazia and she'll get you registered. We have different dates throughout July, August, September, and on and on. And we can train anybody over the age of 18 years of age. So thank you very much for your time today.
And then
But actually, we have a QR code for CEU.
For CEUs, thank you, Grazia. So you can use that and we'll get CEU certificates to you within about a week to 10 days. Thank
And-
you all very much. Thank you, Joe and Grazia. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
I just want to summarize like next steps for folks too. So we have an hour break at 1 o'clock. If you're attending Monty's talk, single session therapy in 3 acts, that's back in this room. If you're attending No Bullshit Therapy, SST for folks who don't like you, don't want to work with you, don't think they have a problem, don't want to change, Jeff Young's talk, that's at 1 in the other building, 303 Superior. It's like maybe a 1-minute walk from here, 2-minute walk. And then if you're attending Monica and Atina's talk, a guide to developing SSIs from existing interventions, that's 3:30 to 5:30 in that location as well. Thanks. And for folks on virtual, we're going to close out these links, but then we'll be back on them at 1 o'clock Central Time. Thanks. All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Great job. Very nice.